I know we're at that time where you're going to work and it's dark, and you're coming home and it's dark, and
Yeah.
I kind of feel that's part of a reason why I had a bit of a mental dip lately. I think it you sort of think it can't be about that, but I think it's definitely something, isn't it? With the clocks going back, they go back. Yeah, the clocks go back,
Yeah,
fall back. I think that's all. It all adds layers to it, I think.
I think so. There's never a really simple answer. And so there's never a really simple solution, which is probably an interesting talking point today, actually.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. Well, the way I've done it, we've started. Hello, Lucy.
Hello.
Hi, friends, everybody listening and watching. Hi, Lucy. I've been, well, myself and Neil, I've been very lucky that we've got to speak to you a couple of times on various podcasts that we've done. And you've always come out with some cracking stories. I would recommend anybody finding Lucy's episodes on our WTAF This Country podcast and on our top 10 of anything, because top 10 of anything, we did Toys We Loved as a Child. I think that was the one,
We
wasn't it?
did. Yeah, it was so much fun. And I think for the This Country podcast, it was it was going back to my Cherry Burton years and
That's right.
what I got up to and the kind of the innocence of the naughtiness, if that makes sense.
I'm not going to spoil anything, but if you those episodes are still up on any podcast provider, go and listen to the one with Lucy, because I mean, I don't know what the statute of limitations is, but she did definitely give us a few juicy morsels of information.
Yes.
But obviously this is a little bit of a different kind of podcast. It's more of just an informal chat kind of thing. But I wanted to talk to you not just about the books that you've written, but also the way I've been looking at it since starting doing this podcast. It's things when you have mental health issues or depression or anything like that, starting something like writing a book, whether you've got mental health issues or not, must be absolutely like daunting, because you've got that blank page in front of you and you have to work out how you're going to fill it. Now, I noticed on your social media you've been trying to have this regimen of, I'm going to do so many words a day.
Yeah.
Now, is that adding anxiety in that, because you start off with a blank page, now you're giving yourself another thing of like, I'm going to do how many thousand words a day is it you want to do?
Oh, do you know what? I haven't.
Oh.
I haven't. Do you know what I did? I started off really well.
Okay.
The issue for me is that there's so much that goes on in my brain that goes on really, really quickly that I then get distracted. And so I've got quite a few projects going on at once. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to concentrate on this one, 3,500 words a day. I mean, that was ridiculous in its own thing. But that's how my brain works. It gets massively excited about something, and then it gets distracted and really excited about something else. And yeah, it's part of the whole personality that links to the, personality is obviously very distinct from having a mental health problem. But there are some crossovers, I think, and some parts of my personality play into the anxiety as well. So that high level of excitement does cross into high levels of anxiety at times. So you're right, it was a ridiculous layer to add on, but I've learned enough to know I don't need to give myself a slap on the wrist for not sticking to my own ridiculous ambitions.
Right. But is it part of your character then that you want to give yourself these little bridges to cross, or these little walls to climb? And
Yeah.
how do you, because I know if I do that for myself, if I don't make those bridges, or if I don't climb that wall, then it is a stick to beat myself with. It's another little layer of saying, well, you're just not good enough because you failed again, And I find that with dieting and with trying to keep fit or trying to get fit, first thing in the morning, I've got all the best intentions. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. I get home, sit down, have my tea, and that's it. I'm done for the day. So it must be, I don't know. Is it easier or harder to set yourself these levels, and how do you deal with it and cope with it for yourself?
I think so for me, targets work really, really well. And I mean, when you've just mentioned there as well about like, lifestyle and food and things like that. And I have in the past had, I think my upset with food in the past has been very much around that I felt out of control, because I am quite food obsessed, and in the past I felt very much out of control. Now, if I set myself a target to not eat certain things, it doesn't work. I have to set myself a target to eat certain things. So the idea of, I don't know, looking at more and more recipe books and introducing more different foods and things like that, because at the end of the day, having a more balanced diet is better for you, because I'm such a carb monster. I could eat buttered toast all day.
I've just literally had 2 pieces of buttered toast.
Yeah, I've just had my crumpets, and I would probably want more later, and that's fine, that's cool, and it's winter, we need to do that. But so for me, actually, taking things away from me doesn't work. So, you know, the idea that you can't sit on the sofa and watch a film that you want to watch and have a lazy, that doesn't work for me. I need to give myself things to do, not things that I can't do, not restrict myself. And I think when it comes to work as well, you know, I need to be careful that, like we said, I don't get overexcited and set ridiculous targets. And if I do, I think I know at the start that I'm being ridiculous, so I'm less likely to beat myself up about it. But I actually just said this morning, I've got something my agent's given me a deadline for, and the deadline is in 3 weeks. And I said to my husband, this is going to be hell for 3 weeks, because I want to do it now. I want to hand this in now, and I want to get some feedback the day after, and I want to know where I'm at. So for me, and I think this links to anxiety, there's an uncertainty that I can't cope with. I just, like, if I've got something to do, I want to get it done. I know I need to have it done by this date, And if that goes into the future too long for me, I struggle with it. I don't know why. It's, yeah.
But so that's quite interesting, because when you say, so you would rather be able to get instant reaction to be able to feed off that and work on that, than have a like a finite line at the end of like 3 weeks, and that, so after that 3 weeks, is that thing then taken away from you and you can't do anything with that?
Well, yeah, and then you've got to wait, haven't you? You've got to, and because people work at a normal pace, whereas I get ridiculously overexcited and need to do, oh, there's a new project, we're going to try for this, or we're going to apply for this, right? But the deadline is in 3-4 weeks. I'm like, oh my God, but I've got this now and I'm excited by it, and I'm going to do it now. I'm going to literally do it right now. So I do really struggle with that. I do struggle with patience and uncertainty. And I think that definitely links to anxiety. And I know when I was working with student minds, and, you know, what some of their psychologists and counsellors and people put together for students, they found that because I was working with them around the time of the pandemic, that one of the hardest things that students were struggling with in relation to their mental health was uncertainty. And I think that links, like I say, it links to anxiety. So I mean, we're all very different. I think we all respond to things differently. Some people probably benefit from, you know, telling themselves that they can't do this, that, and the other to improve their work ethic or their life or whatever. But that really does not work for me. It really doesn't. I need to add to my life in order to benefit.
I think something like, I mean, the pandemic was such a unique experience for everybody. For some people, it didn't affect them. Like my wife worked in a supermarket, so she was a frontline worker, so nothing changed for her. Whereas I was off for, I think it was 4 months or something. It was just crazy. But like, what you say about the uncertainty, my anxiety went into overdrive because I was absolutely sure that this virus was going to get me. So I never went out. I stayed in all the time. And I was scared when... not scared, but I was uncertain when, like, my wife would come home, because I thought, oh my God, who has she been mixing with? And my daughter was a veterinary nurse, so who has she been mixing with? And oh my God, and and you look at it now and you think it's ridiculous. I mean, it was just that nobody knew, wasn't it? But the thing is, like with yourself, I mean, I suppose being an author, you could just crack on and carry on working, or was that uncertainty in your mind that stopped you from doing that?
No, do you know, it's interesting for me, the pandemic, when it first started, I became, because I have health anxiety as well, I became, interestingly, it wasn't COVID that I became obsessed with. It was all forms of cancer. I don't know why. I have
Oh,
no idea
right.
why. I had to have a phone, obviously, because we were having phone conversations with GPs then, weren't we? And I had to speak to my GP at the start of pandemic. We'd just gone into lockdown, started working from home. And of course, obviously, I did have, because I'm quite creative and my imagination runs wild, I did start thinking of, end of the world kind of stuff was kind of in there,
Yeah, yeah. I
This
think
is like,
everybody was doing that.
yeah, it was such a weird time. You watch these movies, like, don't you, like science fiction and stuff, and you think, can you imagine if you're in that situation where the whole world was like coming to an end unless these two people like
Yeah,
solved something, and
yeah.
it had that kind of vibe. But the thing that was making me ill, clearly the pandemic triggered some health anxiety, but it came out as, have I got ovarian cancer? Have I got cervical cancer? Have I got stomach cancer? Have I got leukemia? I became obsessed with all these different types of cancers. And when I spoke to my doctor, oh, she was so good, because she took me very seriously on each one and kind of seriously talked through, well, those symptoms are not indicative. Actually, you would be going through other things. And so she took me seriously and talked me through those things, and then said, what I'm more concerned about is your anxiety, and the harm that that's going to do to you, and would you like to see a counselor again? So it was really great, and I to have that support. But yeah, it was not only that, it was a time of uncertainty for me, because I was working for an organization, like a tourism organization at the time. So
Right.
there was no tourism. So I was made redundant. I think, probably at the end of a long line of people who had been made redundant from the organization, because that had been going on for a little while. So that kind of, gave me a huge amount of uncertainty. But I don't know how I did it. I somehow turned it into a positive, because for years my mum had been saying to me, you'd be a brilliant freelancer. And I was like, I can't do it. I can never do it. Oh my God, the mortgage, never. But because I'd been forced into a situation, it wasn't like I was making the decision not to do an in-house job. That
Mm.
decision had been made for me. So I was adding to rather than taking away. And so that felt quite empowering. And yeah, and here we are now, and I'm still freelancing, and I'm happier than I've ever been in my line of work. So
So
yeah.
I always talk about layers, because I always feel things like anxiety and depression. It's not one big lump of something. It's, for me anyway, it's layers of things that go on top, and it gets to a certain point where it just gives. So yeah,
Yeah.
it just does that. Something like working freelance, I always think to myself, that has got to be one of the most. I mean, already you've got this blank page that you've got to try and fill out. Then you're
Yeah.
a freelancer, so you like, if you don't work, you don't get
Yeah.
paid.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, I'm not feeling well today, so I'm going to take a day off. Again, that must add to the anxiety. I mean, I suppose at the start, when you're just starting it, it must add the anxiety.
Yeah, so at the start, because I didn't have enough faith in myself, because I'd never done it before, I was applying for in-house roles whilst building my freelance
Right.
portfolio, thinking that if I don't get enough of this freelance work, I might have some interviews, and I'm therefore still trying to get, a salary. But yeah, I mean, I've had recently, God, I was on the phone to my mum literally 2 weeks ago, like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. Like, I've got a massive tax bill to pay. I've fucked up like all my tax savings. Like, what am I going to do? And then literally the very next day, one of the funding bids that I'd put in came off. And my mum was saying to me at the time, have more faith in yourself. You always get through these things. It's never the end of the line. Like, you will be fine. And I never learned that. I catastrophize. And that is something that I am very used to doing, and I have done pretty much all my life, is that, you know, if there is a little bit of uncertainty, like, you know, oh, there's like within 3 months, I'm going to need to bring in X amount of work on top of my retainers, I start flipping out about it. Whereas my husband, who has always been self-employed, he's like, that's a really good position to be in.
Yeah.
Gonna be you do that all the time anyway. You work business development, you do it anyway. But I catastrophize it, and I do that with most things. You know, if my cat's sick, it's like, oh, there's something seriously wrong with the cat. They've got a sinister disease, and I'm going to lose them early. And yeah, catastrophizing is very familiar to me.
Do you class that as a positive characteristic though? Because there's people that I know that sort of go through life and they are very what's the word? But nothing seems to faze them. You know, it's just like they just carry on. And I always think I'm pretty much the same as you. I always tend to be a glass half empty kind of guy, as in I think the worst thing is going to happen. If it doesn't happen, that's a plus.
Yes.
As opposed to it being like, oh my God, if it's going to happen, then all hell breaks loose, and then you're kind of pleasantly surprised. You know, it's kind of, do you feel that's a positive characteristic rather than going on being absolutely positive about everything all the time?
So I think it can be. I mean, me and my husband have talked about this before. Like, I would never wish, because we've both experienced panic attacks over the years, and I find them the most terrifying thing I've ever been through. Because even though nothing terrifying is actually happening, it authentically feels terrifying. And I would never wish them on anyone. But one of the plus sides from having felt that way is the contrast for when things are calm. So I find such satisfaction in the smallest things, which I'm really grateful for. Like, you know, sometimes if I'm sat in bed and reading a book and there's a cat sat with me, I take that moment to think, God, the calm, the peace, there is no doom descending, there is no terror, because although I don't get panic attacks as much anymore, hardly ever these days, I mean, really hardly ever, I've really got them under control. You know, I still remember how terrifying those things were. And so the contrast of when things are just calm, you know, I don't have to be like winning a lottery and going on holiday and I haven't been abroad for about 8 years or something. I'd love a holiday. But being able to find that sort of gratitude in just those little moments is a lovely thing. And I do think it's all about contrast. If you've been somewhere quite dark and scary in your head, or if you've experienced that as actual real life trauma, I think that is something that you can appreciate more.
Right. The episode that I did before this one with a therapist called Jen Porvasi from America. I asked her the question because I'm not spiritual. I'm not religious. I don't believe in religion, but I'm not sold on spirituality. And she told me a couple of things to try. And it's weird you said that thing about when you saw the cat, you were just thinking about the cat, and that to me was like, that's like baseline spirituality. Just if you're washing your hands, just don't do anything else, just concentrate on what you're doing, the feeling and stuff like that. So I'm starting to going through just to see, as a skeptic, you know, I'm kind of going in with my arms folded and sort of like, well, come on then, show me what you can do, which probably isn't the right attitude to have going. You should be a bit more open. But have you ever, do you deal in spirituality? Are you a spiritual kind of person?
I think to a degree. I'm not religious. I celebrate Christmas, but I'm not really.
Well, that's about presents though, isn't it? And turkey.
Yeah. So I'm not religious, but I do feel that there is something out there. And I've always been interested in, because I did a lot of work with recovery charities and the 12-step program and the higher power and things like that. So I'm quite interested in that, and how having a belief that there is something beyond us, whatever that might be, whether it be nature or something spiritual, whatever, is like a really good thing. So I have noticed that I remember when I was having a sort of a mini panic attack one time, and I looked out of the window. So I was doing the thing where you say, when you just stop and you're just washing your hands and you just allow yourself that moment of being in the present. And at that time, because there weren't as many houses built around us then, on a new estate, and we were one of the earliest to move in, I think. So there was just this clear view over to all the trees, and it just had that thing of reminding you that you're quite a small thing in this huge world, and it gives you that perspective, which is so calming. Weirdly, it sounds like, in some ways, it sounds like a negative thing, thinking that you're not that important. But I think when you deal with anxiety, there is, I don't know if you call it an ego thing with it, but it's that thing where you feel like, it's that persecutory sort of, people out to get me, or like, of course something bad's going to happen to me, of course. But I don't know whether it's like ego or whatever. It's almost narcissistic in a weird way.
I completely agree with that. Absolutely.
It doesn't mean, because I think that's the thing, narcissistic doesn't mean that we're all like Donald Trump, does it?
Oh God, no, I hope not.
And I read that there are two sides to it. There's like the extrovert and the introvert narcissist, and I think that's right. The introverted narcissist is more about, things that are happening, bad things that can happen to me, and because it's me, and so it's all wrapped up in me, but not necessarily, oh, it's because I'm great. It's just, for whatever reason, you become a bit preoccupied with bad things happening to you. And I think that drives a lot of my anxiety. But so, yeah, I do think that nature is really good for you. And my husband is like massive. He's always been into nature and the outdoors. So like, if he's ever struggling, and like he said a bit like you, when it comes to winter and everything's dark, he struggles a bit because he needs that kind of, being outdoors all the time stuff. So he will make an effort to just get in the car, go to his favorite beach and just walk down it and just take it in, and often on his own. So there's no distraction. He's just there in the moment. And I think that's, I think you can get a lot from nature.
I completely agree with all that. I think I am an introverted narcissist, because it definitely, the amount of times I feel like I'm the one that's, I've said on this podcast before, if I see two people talking, I automatically think they're talking about me.
Yes.
Even if they're people I don't know, or if it's just that weird thing. I think, what have I done wrong? Why are they? What have I done that they're talking about me? Why don't they just come over and say to me instead? And then your brain then gets filled with all these different scenarios of what have I done wrong? Why are they talking about? Why don't they like me? And they're people that they're just talking about their tea or something like that. Yeah. It just becomes a constant battle with, and voices in your head of like, they really don't like you. You've done something really bad, and it becomes The one thing I did want to ask you, I noticed again, I've not been stalking you, but I was just looking at your social media. You were saying about when you were saying about a book signing not long ago, and you were saying, oh God, I just don't want that anxiety of turning up and there being nobody there. That again is another layer to your work, that you not only, again, this blank page, then you've got to work out how you're going to do this when somebody's saying I need this in 3 weeks, or you've got to do this. Then you've got to go out in public and perform, basically.
Yeah, so I was talking about this yesterday with my cousin, actually, because for me, I mean, I used to be so unbelievably shy. Like, the idea of standing up in front of an audience would just make me feel sick. But when I was in my early 20s, I kind of knew that I wanted to get past that, and so I really pushed myself to do that, and I've got to a point now where I'm really quite comfortable doing that. So if somebody gave me a guaranteed audience of 200, who were interested in the topics I was talking about and plunked me on a stage, I'd be very, very happy. I'd be very comfortable doing that. The idea of going somewhere and it being all about you and the people are going to turn up because they're interested in you, and they might like the idea of going somewhere and two people turning up, it just absolutely terrifies me. It's crushing. It's a clearly it's a self-esteem thing. It takes you back to that thing of, you know, is anyone going to come to my birthday party? It's like that, isn't it? It's yeah, that's the worst bit for me of being an author, is not having to speak publicly but having to attract interest to your speech or whatever it is, your conversation. So I have found, like, I did an event at Collected Books in Durham a few months ago, which was fabulous because it was a book club. So they already had read the book and they knew people were going to be coming to discuss the book because that was the format. So, you know, even though I knew that not everybody there liked my book, they didn't, but they were there to discuss it, and that felt quite comfortable,
right,
for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, going somewhere to introduce the book, and, you know, especially where there's like no ticket involved and it's just people just like walk up, and yeah, it's terrifying.
But when you're writing, I can imagine it's a little bit like podcasting. It's like you're writing with yourself, you're in the heads of the characters. You're not, or are you thinking about the people that are going to read the book? Or are you just in that moment? This is like, say, same podcasting, we're just chatting. I'm not thinking that somebody in America is going to listen to this or someone in Australia is going to listen to this. I'm just having a conversation with you, like as if we were just going out for a coffee or something. Do you ever think about the reader when you're doing the book, when you're actually physically writing it?
Yeah, so I think this comes from, again, it's catastrophizing, and possibly why I was so suited to working in PR and media, because there's, you know, a media crisis or something. It was very easy for me to think about what is the worst angle somebody could take from this and how can I mitigate against that. I mean, I do it at the minute when I do interviews with people with lived experience of mental health problems, and, you know, I can have an hour-long in-depth conversation with them. For example, if we're talking about intrusive thoughts, and I have a good understanding of intrusive thoughts and how intrusive thoughts do not equal intention, you know, but I am constantly thinking, how can I safeguard this person's story if an editor or somebody might pick it up and twist it around? So
right.
I have this natural propensity, I suppose, to think like that, to think what's the worst that somebody could think when reading this. So actually, when I'm writing something, particularly when I'm writing about a sensitive topic, so yes, it's fiction, but I'm always thinking, how does this person come across? How does this character come across? How could she be perceived? You know, how can we keep the audience guessing but without hating on it? But also, how, as an author, will I be perceived for having explored these issues in the way that I've explored them? So I do think as I'm writing things, my brain is constantly thinking about what is the worst thing that a reader could think about me and this character in this book I'm reading. So
wow.
Yeah.
So you have that in your head as you're writing it. That, I mean, that's another layer, isn't it, on there straight away? Does that make it easier to write then, or does that make it a little bit harder to write with that extra wall you've got to jump when you're thinking about that?
I think that, I'll be honest, I think that dampens creativity a little bit.
Yeah.
So on the
is
one
it almost
hand,
like you're censoring yourself?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know what impact that has on the finished product and people's perceptions of it. I don't really know. I know that because I'm trying to safeguard my characters, my story, myself, especially when I write nonfiction as well, and I've got real people stories to deal with, I think it's a really positive thing.
Right.
Because you can't, you know, it's like when you drive a car, you can drive the car as carefully as you want to, but it's how other people
That's
are driving, how other people are reacting on the road and stuff. And I think that's a similar thing with especially the media. You know, we all know that celebrities get interviewed, don't they? And they can say something and it can just be like taken out of context and spun around. And so I do really worry about that. But I do think, so I think particularly in non-fiction is very, very helpful. I think in fiction, it's probably an area of development for me, to be honest, to kind of loosen up a bit.
Yeah.
Especially because I've been so interested in, you know, when we've thought about flawed characters, I've always gone as far as to look at, I love a flawed character, but they're usually flawed in very likable ways, like they're flawed by their vulnerability, for example. Whereas when you watch something like, which I love, like Irving Welsh's Crime, these flawed characters are not just flawed in their vulnerability, but they're flawed in that they sometimes do quite selfish or narcissistic, but you are still kind of cheering them on because you're accepting them warts and all kind of thing. And that, you know, there is something inherently good about what they're trying to do, but they're certainly not perfectly good people. So I do think I need to try to stop jumping to like the worst possible outcome and let my creativity run a bit wilder.
Yeah, because I wonder with like your fictional works, if you're thinking about what the audience might think or what they might say about a specific character, does it stop your character then doing what you want it to naturally do? Do you veer off and change that character's path?
I mean, to an extent it can do. It doesn't always. I mean,
Is that frustrating then when you think you're doing it for that reason?
I think that there are, but I think there are times when I do, like I've killed off characters before who were lovely characters who didn't deserve to die, but right. I need that twist in a story.
Yeah.
That feels quite difficult. And you know, putting your characters through the ringer when you're like, oh, haven't they been through enough? No, actually. So that's that other side of the kind of the reader thing, is that they want the jeopardy and they want the whole kind of roller coaster of emotion. And sometimes as well, I suppose sometimes I'm kind of going against what I've said before in a little way, because sometimes I feel like I've got to be so true to real life in terms of managing expectations that I don't neatly tie endings up sometimes. And I've had people say to me, I was so angry with you.
Oh, really?
I really wanted like proper justice to happen and you didn't let it happen. Why didn't you let it happen? It made me quite angry. And I was like, because it doesn't, does it? Like, you know, I kind of like, what if I'm writing this story and I've got everyone thinking, yeah, I just have to stand up and speak out and the whole world's going to be better and society's going to be better and the bad people are going to get their just desserts, and it doesn't happen like that. So I feel a little bit of responsibility in that way in terms of managing expectations. You know, if I do speak out about an injustice, actually it's not going to be that easy, and I'm not just going to, you know, win the world over and put the bad guys in prison or in their place or whatever it might be. And sometimes the reader wants that.
I mean, as an author, that must be a wonderful feeling that you've got somebody so invested in your story that they are not happy with one of the things that you've done, rather than come up and say, I agree with everything you did, it was fantastic. If you got somebody that comes up and they were so passionate about your story that they want to come and confront you and say, I didn't like that at all.
Yes, I love that, because I think as well, going back to that idea of when you can be so sort of self-obsessed in a, like what we were talking about, like, you know, someone doesn't like my book, it's because I'm rubbish. You know, that's the first thing my brain jumps to. If someone doesn't like my book, it's because I'm a rubbish writer and I don't deserve to have a book in this genre and blah, blah, blah. But when someone says that to you about, you know, how could you do that? I was so angry with you. And, you know, if you
go, job done. Yeah, tick, job done.
Exactly. So they might have, because people rate books in very different ways, they could have given you a 2-star rating for that, because even though they got quite involved in it, as a reader, what they want out of a book is to feel satisfied. some readers want to feel a bit like left with questions, and whereas others, if you don't tie things up, they might not like them. We're all totally different, and we all read for very different reasons. But yeah, if I had a bad review because of something like that, I would feel like job done. I've provoked somebody. I mean, I had one recently that I actually used anonymously. I didn't say her name, obviously, but I had an absolutely terrible review, 1-star review, because my book had lots of swear words and periods and blood in it. And so I just turned it around and said, so obviously this doesn't suit everyone, but if you like swear words, periods and blood in a book, then give my book a try. And I sold loads more books. Because we are all different. But back to the anxiety and self-esteem thing, it's so easy and it's a very natural place for me to just fall into it's because I'm a crap writer and they don't like me. It's not the case at all.
That's that internal narcissist again, isn't it? Is that without a shadow of a doubt. So I mean, I suppose you can't tell us what you're working on at the moment, but you've obviously got a lot of stuff going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm moving into, because I've been chatting with my agent a lot, who is like my manager, therapist, friend. She's like everything rolled into one. She's brilliant. And I've been chatting to her a lot about my direction recently, and because I suppose I was writing things that didn't fit neatly into any genre, and because I've now written things that fit in lots of different genres, and we're trying to find a place for me to establish myself and sort of build an author brand, I suppose. And because I like the dark stuff, but I love humour, she was saying something I'd written was kind of erring on the psychological thriller sort of genre. So obviously I've read a bit more in that area, and I've got some funding actually to develop in that area. So I've had some mentoring. I'm so excited. I'm doing a crime fiction course and one-to-one mentoring with a former detective. I'm very, very excited about that. Brilliant author called Nikki Smith, who's been helping me. So whilst I'll not say too much about the actual premise of the books that I'm working on, they are in the sort of dark psychological thriller space, but I love dark humor and gallows humor, and so with a sprinkling of that. So I feel like I'm really finding my feet now. I just need to develop in that area, and it's a great place as well, being able to be mentored and coached by people, because then you feel less alone, and you've got to be willing to learn from others, because even if you've got a great idea, there's a lot about the sort of tropes you need to follow, or like pace and plot and craft. And so I'm learning a lot at the minute, and I'm absolutely loving it.
You're so Hollywood with that Hollywood answer, isn't it? I can't tell you anything about it at the moment. Okay, last question, which is in 2 parts, which have now become like the stock end of the podcast. If you could go back to your 10-year-old self, what would you say to her?
Just open your mouth and speak, because I think I was, just trust whatever comes out. Just know that what you've got to say is important and is worth saying, because I think for a long time, I think the reason I was so shy is probably because it's a self-esteem thing, isn't it? I don't have anything important or relevant to say, and I think that carried right into my teens and everything. So yeah, just speak.
Yeah. Did you grow up in like a noisy household where you didn't have chance to speak, or was it more like you just didn't want to?
No, I think I was probably quite outspoken in my household. Like, I think my parents were very sociable. Have a sister. We fought like cat and dog growing up, so we were definitely quite outspoken with each other. It was outside of that, I think.
Right.
So in school, moving into the workplace when I was very young, I was very, very, very shy, and I do think that comes from a place of self-esteem and self-worth. So Yeah, I'm very outspoken these days.
Making the most of it, yeah. Making up for lost time.
Exactly, yeah.
And the second part of the question, your 75-year-old self comes back and sees you now. What do you think she'd say to you?
I think she'd be proud of my relentless trying to better myself, but I think she would tell me to, put the brakes on, take some time out and chill because you've only got one life. So balance things out.
Yeah. And she
Put
says,
your feet up, watch a crime drama. You don't have to be creating all the time. Yeah.
Eat some carbs, and she'll say to you, don't worry, you've had plenty of holidays abroad as well. You've had plenty of time away.
Yes, totally. Eat some chips, some buttered crumpets, and big pizza and a beer. Why not?
Nice. So, if everybody wanted to get hold of your stuff, I take it you must have a website or anything like that.
Yes, I've got a link tree with everything on, but I can't remember what it is. It's probably just if you Google Linktree Lucy Nichol, but it's on my Twitter and everything. So I'm on Twitter, or X. I don't call it X. Twitter.
I
know. Twitter. Lucy E. Nichol, and I think the same on TikTok and Instagram.
Well, I'll put if I can get hold of the link tree, I'll put that in the show notes so people can just click on it. And which is your latest? Is Nowhere As If Not? That's your latest book, is it?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a feminist rom-com. So No Worries If Not, set in Newcastle, and it's about one woman's mission to break up with the word sorry. So it's kind of about self-esteem and stuff as well there. Having, knowing you have got a place in the world. Yeah.
Right. And is Amazon the best place to get that for you, or anywhere?
Anywhere. It's
anywhere.
Amazon, Waterstones, WH Smith's, whatever.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll find the Amazon link and put that in the show notes as well, so people can get that. Lucy, before I actually say a proper goodbye, I've got to get through all this gubbins that I have to say as well. If you want to get in touch with us, please email bigblackbearpod@gmail.com. The links for our Linktree and Spotify and Amazon and Apple and Good Pods, where you can listen to the podcast. And to watch it on YouTube as well, all in the show notes, along with our social media. Again, they shorten it to X, but you've got to say now X, formerly known as Twitter, which makes it longer. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Why didn't they just keep it as it was? Oh, Elon, what are you doing? I don't know. But if you enjoy the podcast and it helps on some small way, but you need urgent help, then please call the Samaritans in the UK on 116123. In the US, it's 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-TALK. Or the US suicide hotline is just 988. And if you want something a bit more lighter and a bit more... isn't it lighter? But I don't know. I'll do a top 10 pod with my pod bro Neil, which Lucy has very kindly been on, and hopefully you'll come and join us again in the new year as well, because we'd have to find something another fun one to do. But like I say, come and listen to Lucy on it was top 10 toys you wanted as a child, which was a great one.
Yeah.
And then also find us on the WTAF This Country with Lucy, because she's got some great stories. I don't know how many of them have followed their way into their books. I don't know, but I'm sure they may have.
Might have to do that. Yeah.
But thank you very much for joining me, Lucy. It's always a pleasure to chat to you. It really is, even though it's early in the morning.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been good fun.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye, friends.